Hi, Ashton. Welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Good, my pleasure. You've written some books, four of them, I think, on
Mm.
sketchnoting. Fascinating
Yeah,
stuff. And you were
yeah.
so gracious to send me your beginner's guide on sketchnoting. I looked through it, and the illustrations are wonderful. And we're going to get right to that for sure.
Mhm.
And also, you live in Nova Scotia just like me.
I know when we hopped on before we started recording, I was like, how's it over in your neck of the woods?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Usually I encounter people who don't even know where Nova Scotia is, to be honest with
Same
you. I
here.
have to try to describe it. So the
Well,
fact that you're just a short hop away, I love that so
no
much.
time
Makes me
conversion
feel
necessary.
I
And uh,
know, it's a
and
beautiful
when I
thing.
tell people I'm AST, I have to explain that it's 1 hour later than EST.
Exactly. I feel
You
your
know,
pain.
except in the Caribbean, I had a Caribbean guest, and they're AST as well. No,
Oh, that makes sense.
well,
Yeah,
let's move
cool.
on. I'd like to hear more about, and I'm sure the people watching this would like to know a little bit more about you.
Hmm. Sure. Yeah, so we all know where I live, so that's one thing. I'm a mother of three, which I always like to mention because it's a pretty important part of my life. And I live in an old farmhouse in the woods, and it's a great place to be. So professionally, for the last 10 years, I have been doing graphic facilitation and live illustration practices where I get to work with diverse groups from small nonprofits here in Nova Scotia all the way up to like Fortune 500 companies, helping them visualize information that flows out of a conference or a meeting or a strategic planning session, basically where anyone's trying to have a conversation that's a little bit complicated. We're trying to get information across because most people think of pictures. I'm there to help visualize and draw in real time the conversation as it unfolds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Before I heard from you and you mentioned what you do, I
Mhm.
didn't even know such a thing existed.
Most people don't know. Yeah, and
Sketchnoting.
luckily I've been able to make a career out of it for quite a while now, which is a great place to be for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you have, like I said, four books, and I think you really want to talk about your introduction to sketchnoting.
Yeah, that's definitely my like fourth child for sure. This beginner's guide to sketchnoting is my fourth baby, that's for sure.
Well, tell me
Yeah.
all about it.
Yeah, so one thing that I would always be encountering when I show up at these meetings or these conferences and doing these live illustrations is like a lot of comments. People be like, "Oh, I can't draw," or "Oh, I would love to learn how to do that," or "Oh, I'm a visual learner," or "Oh." They would always say like usually one of those things. And I would always find myself kind of like, I don't want to say annoyed, but like a little bit, because I feel like what I do isn't rocket science and everybody could learn how to do it, even, and especially if you don't know how to draw, because it's really not about learning. It's not really about knowing how to draw. It's learning some drawing elements like lines and squares and things that can help you elevate information in a way, and you can get all of the amazing benefits of taking doodles that you might already doing and making them more meaningful for you. So I was trying to figure out like how could I explain this in a way that would make it very low barrier to entry, that anybody could pick up the book and by the end of it they could feel like they could learn how to do this. And in 2006, I believe, a guy named Mike Rohde released a book called The Sketchnote Handbook, and he kind of coined the term sketchnoting. Mind you, this skill set has been around for a long time, but he kind of coined it into that term,
Mhm.
which kind of since then has got a bit popularized. So when I was going to write this book, I was like, do I call it visual note taking or do I call it sketchnoting? And obviously, I went with sketchnoting. Um, but yeah, so that's sort of part of my journey into wanting to create this book for a while. And there are some great sketchnoting books out there and like visual thinking and visual communication and like, but they're very like, I find a lot of them very high level. A lot of them are like for professionals. trying to, like, maybe they're facilitators or they're like professional communicators. And I wanted something where kind of anybody at any stage in their growth or development, if they want to learn this for fun, for their own personal note taking in school, if they want to use it in a business setting, it could kind of be used in multiple ways and in like a very easy to understand, digestible way, especially if maybe consider yourself like have like maybe a different relationship to your creativity, because people always seem to have this like very odd relationship to what creativity means to them, and
Hmm.
a lot of people think that they aren't, and that's like we could talk for a whole hour just about that. um so anyway, so I was trying to figure out like how could I put this book together, what does this look like, and how could I kind of take my 10 years of experience, or I guess 8.5 up to that point, and put it into this book. And I read a book called Write Useful Books by Rob Fitzpatrick. And I really fell in love with his philosophy on how to write useful nonfiction. And when I was struggling on figuring out how to put this book together, I realized after I read his and why that was, which is a lot of nonfiction are actually idea books. They're like, you should form habits. Habits are good for you. End of book. You should start a business. It would be great. End of book. Like, it's more about like the philosophy or the theory or the ideas behind why you should do this thing, and less on the practicality of like, you should do this thing and this is how you actually do it. And I don't know if it's like authors or people get nervous about, well, if I tell them how to do it this way, then they might get stuck and not think of other ways that they could accomplish this thing in their life. Um, so when I was putting the book together, I was really inspired by Rob's philosophy of trying to write the most useful book as possible. And that's kind of how I got started. We can talk a little bit more about that, but that's kind of how I was like, gave myself permission. Yes, I could write a book and it could be a useful one, and really kind of walk people through how to do their own sketchnoting for themselves.
Well, it sounds to me that you had to do that mental assent to writing a book as much as those who say they can't draw have to do the same thing to get to the point
True.
where they can draw. You're not asking them to write a
Yeah.
book, right?
Hmm.
And aren't we
Yeah,
all
I think,
creative? I mean, when we were children, we drew, everyone drew, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think I put it like right in the beginning of my book around like most people have a story where someone or some experience told them that they were not creative. And whether or not you can remember it, a lot of people can. We just believe. It's just like any belief that we have about ourselves or in our life. We believe that thing. And unfortunate, there's such a high percentage of people in our world that go, creativity, that's not for me. That's for those people, those other
Mhm.
people who are creative. Um, and I certainly had my fair share of stories of people kind of diminishing my creativity, and it is very hard to look past those and say, no, I am creative. And we have to define what creativity means for ourselves. Like, what does it mean for me? Like, I really gravitate towards visual art, which is a very common creative medium. When people go, oh, I can't make art or I'm not creative, they just go immediately to visual art. But
Yeah.
it could be like, I see you have guitars in the background. I saw those and I'm like, oh, I've learned how to play guitar. I know how to play guitar. I you could be a really good storyteller. You can be a good audio engineer. Like, all those things are creative in their own way. And it's just a matter of embracing what creativity means to you. But first, before you can even do that, you have to recognize that,
Yeah.
we all are. We live in a world, like, in all the things we have in our lives is a product of someone being creative in
Yes, of
some way,
course, of
shape, or
course. Yeah.
form.
Yeah. Just briefly, some of the things you said there, I have to think about parts of my life. I was rather extreme. At 14 years of age, I told my parents, I'm going to be a rock star. That's just the way it's going to be.
I
And
love
and of
that.
course they were concerned about my future, but I'm the
Yeah.
extreme example. I think overall there's um, a drive to raise children, and I'm not just talking at home, sometimes at home, but through the school system, that we got to get them ready for life. They're going to have to get out there and get a good
Yeah.
job and earn, because earn a living. I mean, it's expensive to live. And
Mhm.
somehow, in one of my books, I mentioned that creativity is weaned out of us, probably for that reason. It's a good intention, but it tells people, no, you don't focus so much on, drawing and stuff like that. Get a job, be a
Yeah.
plumber or whatever. Could that
Yeah.
possibly be part of the problem?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, definitely. I think, unfortunately, a lot of schools and our belief system is around like you have to go, why are we doing all of these things? Why do we go to school? Why do we learn these things? Is to grow up and get a good job, right? So that you can do what? Live in a house and have a family or do whatever it is, right? So if you fall outside of the norm, if you learn in a different way, like my husband has ADHD. I'm surrounded by a lot of people in my family and friends who have ADHD, but I'm like, ADHD is just like, I think we probably all kind of have it. It's just a matter of varying degrees of it. And it's just a matter of like, can you sit still in that classroom? Like, can you sit there and listen? And my son in particular, I think he's going to be fine for a little while, but as he gets older, I could see he's going to struggle potentially a little bit more because he's not going to want to sit there and learn stuff that he doesn't want to learn about, you know?
Yeah.
And I do feel very on like the edges, like of a bit of an odd opinion. Like I was just talking to my husband about this the other day that my feeling is like, if they could just get to grade 9, I'm fine. I'm not that I want them to drop out of school, but at that point, I'm just going to tell them, like, just get through it.
Yeah.
Like, because gone are the days that they have to have these certain courses to go to university. Like, you can just make up a job or you could like go to YouTube University. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think the system that we will have in potentially 10 or less years could be quite a different one where maybe young people will not consider going to university unless they know exactly what it is that they want to do and it has a very particular education path. But for someone like my husband or someone like me, like I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I got all the good grades. I went to all the classes. I did all the things, but I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just wanted to be a mom. And that was not favored. They're like, what? You don't want a job? And I'm like, I'll take a job. That'd be cool. But like, I'm not going to university and spending all my own money and taking out all these loans for what? To get a job, like to take a bunch of education that I don't know what I'm going to do with. Like I already had like the foreshadowing back then, thank
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
So I decided to roll in community college. And I had so many people say to me, wow, you're so smart for someone who goes to community college. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I go to community college because I'm so smart. Like it's yeah, there's just so much stigma about education paths and how we've taken a lot of creative endeavors and projects and things out of the school, which I think is just so unfortunate because like I'm in a lot of business circles with like, some like top companies in the world are some of my clients and they're all saying the same thing. We want creative thinkers,
Right.
right? Where are they? Who knows?
Yeah, they do ask for that. In the end, they
They
ask for,
they want out of the box
out of
creative
the
thinkers,
box thinking.
people who push the boundaries, push the limits. But where are they,
Yeah.
right? We haven't
Fascinating. Yeah.
set up systems for when they were younger growing up because we just want them to like sit there and do it the way that they want us to do it and not
Yeah.
think creatively
Yeah.
and not push back, right? So anyway,
Hmm.
there's my soapbox for the day about that.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. I'm hoping you are going to show us some illustrations. That's, this is what it's all about. Do you have that handy to show a few, or
Yeah,
maybe?
I could show a couple. I could show a
Yeah.
couple. I
Let's show
have
the.
I have my face wall that always
Yes,
gets
I
a
saw
lot
that.
of always gets a lot of comments. It was just kind of like a fun little project I was working on and and it
Are
just ended
they
up being this poster. And
are they
so
sort of caricatures of people you know, or just people you made
no,
up?
they're just people.
Okay.
They're just everyone that has different, like some of them have like birthmarks or
Hmm.
rosy cheeks or different, it's different skin colors and different hairstyles. And
Yeah.
yeah, they definitely have
Mine wasn't that big, but because I did one when I was working at CTV, I did a caricature of each of the people in that department,
I
and I
love
had it on
that.
the wall, and it was pretty close to what they really looked like. It was fun.
I love that. I'm actually really not great at caricatures myself, but give me 1 second and I will grab my pictures. So this is a fireside chat with Adam Grant. He's an author, TED Talk guy. He's a pretty fancy dude. So you can kind of see there's like words, images, icons, drawing elements of like lines and containers and a bunch of different things. And I think this was like, I can't remember, like 45 minutes, right? So when it's all done like live real time, right? So everybody, like they get to see all of the spelling mistakes that I make and I have to change
That's
every time I make
interesting.
a mark and I don't like it and I could change it. Now that's digital for sure. But before COVID, I was 100% on paper with markers.
Yeah.
So I have quite an arsenal of materials that I like to work with as well. And any chance that I do get to work on paper and markers, I definitely do that. But I still also do a lot of digital work as well. This one here, I think this was like a half an hour presentation, right? So it's really highlighting sort of the key ideas, the key messages that are coming out of a conversation. Yeah,
No,
and
so you said,
elevating it
oh,
in a way that's visual and aesthetically pleasing and nice to look at, but also encompasses the lessons and the ideas and things that flow from that conversation or meeting or whatever it is.
mhm. And you say you do this in real time as this
Yeah.
is going on.
It's all in
Interesting.
real time. Yeah. So,
Wow.
for example, last week was a busy one. I was in Halifax and I was doing a digital, but it was like in a movie theater. So they got to project my drawing live, like on a movie theater screen, which was really cool.
Mm.
And I did eight that day, 8 drawings. And then the next 2 days, I was doing a cybersecurity event and I did like 17 over the course of those 2 days. So that was really busy. That was a busy week. I was pretty
Yeah.
tired. By Friday evening, I was pretty tired from it all. But the nice thing when it's happening live, there's of course like the magic of it, but when people are hearing something, then they see it and it reinforces the learning for them,
For
right? Because
sure.
you're engaging multiple
Yeah,
parts of their thinking
absolutely.
and their learning, which is really nice and actually like such a beautiful benefit of it.
Got me thinking. Those caves in northern France, was it 40,000 years ago? They
Yeah.
painted an animal, then they painted it being killed, and then they danced around a fire or something. They're telling a story the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are definitely like the origins of visual communication.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And how, I actually really love cliches because cliches bring us together and like a common understanding of something. So I do love the cliche, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It's a cliche for a reason, right?
Hmm.
And I think that the hieroglyphics and cave paintings and
Yeah.
all of those things are such a beautiful way to show the history of like this just definitely isn't new. Visualizing information isn't new. We just tend to experience it in more media heavy ways,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
YouTube. I always say like YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world for a reason because we
Hmm.
want to see somebody do the thing or draw the thing or make the thing.
Yeah.
Um, right. So we have definitely a leaning towards wanting to see it, but we don't always get to see it
Mm.
like live illustrated, which is kind of like a beautiful way to be able to bring it into more of like maybe a corporate setting
Yeah.
or those types of things, or for your own personal learning if you get to learn how to do it for yourself. Um, but yeah, that's what really sold me on it when I started doing it was experiencing sort of that memory retention for myself and being blown away of how much I could remember just by adding
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
some drawings as I was facilitating meeting. So
Mm.
yeah.
When you're doing a live presentation like you've done just recently, what are the reactions like from the crowd when you're doing these things?
Yeah, so like my style is very playful and very bright. I actually like lean in a lot of um inspiration from like Nova Scotia like folk art. I really love how they use like folk artists use like bright colors and thick black lines and things like that. So but I actually really love infusing humor into my work when appropriate. If it's a very serious conversation, I'm not going to draw something a little funny, but if someone's telling a story, you can draw something that relates to that, and a lot of stories have a lot of humor in them. So it's great when it's just like handed to me. When someone's telling a funny thing or someone says something and everyone laughs, that's just like handed to me. And I love that because the room had an emotional response
Mm-hmm.
as in humor to this situation or to this conversation or this comment or the story, right? And gives me the permission to draw it out, right? So I am a little mindful in terms of what I draw has to really reflect the conversation of the presentation and less about my own personal feelings about it, right? Because then it just
Mm-hmm.
becomes like Ashton's drawing instead of like the drawing for a collective. Now, if you look through my book and you learn how to do sketchnoting for yourself, you can add in all your own personal stuff as much as you want. Like you can add in all the things you want to. But when I'm doing it for others, it definitely adds another element, like a layer of things. So, people, they tend to, like I said earlier, the number one thing I find that people say to me is, "Oh, I love this. I'm a visual learner."
Mm-hmm.
Now, technically, learning styles have been debunked. I should probably look into that a little bit more, but apparently they have been. But people still really put their learning into different buckets of how they prefer to learn, right? Visually, kinesthetically, audibly, all of these things. So, people, that seems to be the number one comment, I think, in terms of like a reaction. They're like, oh my gosh, I love this. Even if they cannot articulate why they like it, like probably I know because of just what I know now
Mm-hmm.
and the brain science and like how we learn things. So yeah, I find it's the people that really have this deeper connection to how they prefer to learn. And because a lot of people do consider themselves, or one of the preferred ways of learning is visually, it resonates with a lot of people. And I think that's why so many people come up to me and they're like, oh, I love this. This is so cool, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. Yeah.
It is. It's very cool. Very cool. And all this, we've been talking about the beginner's guide to
Mm,
sketchnoting. And that should start someone off, from what I've seen, that book that you send me, you know, just basically how to begin doing this and takes you
mhm,
through all the process. But you have
yeah.
3 other books.
Mhm.
If you have time, and we can talk about them. The next one down here I see is called Doodle the Maritimes.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I find some of those other like doodle and activity books more like pet projects. Like this would be fun to create and put into the world. And I like being able to showcase to people that drawing doesn't have to be complicated, right? If you just follow, like, I think it's absolutely fine to copy people's work, to follow a guideline. Like I was talking to someone, I can't remember where I was, but not that long ago, and they said something about, oh, well, my kid, they pull up that YouTube channel and they follow along. And they were saying it like in a negative way, like they should just know how to draw stuff or they should just do their own thing, which I totally agree. And my first career was early childhood education, like allowing kids just to give them a blank page and let them just do stuff is awesome, and like do that for sure. But a lot of kids, they want like to know how to draw something, and they'll give up, unfortunately, before they have the opportunity to actually like figure out how to do it themselves. So I don't think there's absolutely any harm in like following those YouTube videos or like looking at one of the books that I have that actually like shows you like line by line how to draw something. Because once you've done it once and you've gotten success, you feel good about yourself. You're like, oh, I know how to draw it. Like it feels good. And then you can take that thing that you've learned how to draw once in one particular way and then draw it a whole bunch of times and make it your own. Because eventually it's going to turn into your own personal style of how you want to draw it for yourself. But just like cliche, I don't think cliches are a bad thing. I don't think like I think having these like step by step or like looking at like there's nothing I am not harmed if someone looks at some of my work and like tries to copy how I do stuff. Like I think that's great. Like that doesn't hurt my feelings. I think that's great. Like people need a place to start, and just giving someone a blank page sometimes can be just too overwhelming that they don't even begin in the first place. So as for like my sketchnoting book and some of these other ones, it's really about like being playful, having fun, and learning a new skill at the same time in like a really like, you know, non-threatening way, which is why I love talking about doodling so much, because doodling is such like a non-threatening way for people to like enter into the world of drawing,
Yeah.
right? And the way that I frame up drawing is like drawing can be a thinking tool, can be a communication tool, and that's how I use it, and that's how I like to speak about it, right? It doesn't, you're not always going to draw something for it to hang on a wall somewhere. It can be just making some marks for yourself to help yourself think through a process or break down complexity of something, right? We should be using drawing, putting pen to paper or digitally on a tablet to help us do those like complex thinking things that, you know, don't always translate well just in your head. You need to get it down on paper. So any way that I can kind of do that in my own small way of trying to get people to put pen to paper and getting their confidence around drawing, doodling, and all of that good stuff.
I like the word doodling. That's a cool word.
Yeah, when I'm feeling playful and I change my LinkedIn profile every once in a while, I like to call myself a professional doodler. And I think mostly I think for
Happy
the
word.
what the heck is that?
It's a
What do
happy
you
word.
how are you a professional doodler? Yeah, there's this one guy, he's based I think he's originally from England, and he you have to go check out his Instagram, Mr. Doodle. He's created this amazing career, like more from a visual art perspective, doing these really like fun doodles. He's such a he's totally inspiration when it comes to being a professional doodler for sure.
How to draw titles. What do you mean by how to draw titles?
Yeah, so for the world of like sketchnoting, visual note taking, live illustration, whatever you want to call it, it's like so many names. Um, One of the things that I find can be intimidating, like I just mentioned, was that blank page. So most of the time we start with a title, right? Maybe it's just the date. Maybe that's all the information that we have, or maybe it's like the name of a presentation or the name of the meeting, like it's this transformation meeting or whatever it is, right? So if you can ground yourself in taking the hesitation or the worry of starting with a blank page by putting a nice title at the top, sometimes that can be just such a small, seemingly insignificant, but quite powerful way to help you get started. And I think that's one of the, I feel like a theme of what I've been talking about is just trying to get people to get started on something and getting their confidence to start, because then it can just snowball from there, right? So I really take a lot of pride in my titles, right? Having something beautiful at the top of the page
I noticed. Yeah.
that shows this is why we're meeting or this is what this topic is about.
Yeah.
So spending an extra few minutes, if you have the time, just to kind of make a nice title at the top of the page can actually really make a big difference in how you enter into that space of using these drawings to help you think.
Mhm. Is part of your process in, helping people achieve what you're hoping they would achieve done through digital or drawing, like literal drawing with markers or pen? And do you both of them?
Yeah, so I do both. Pre-COVID, I was 100% on paper.
Hmm.
Post-COVID, now I'm a lot digital. I've stayed and retained a lot of digital, but I still, when I'm traveling around the Maritimes, still take a lot of my paper and markers with me. But yeah, there's pros and cons to both. And you actually might really appreciate this analogy because I never know if it's going to hit well for people, but because you have guitars in the background, I'm going to give you this analogy. So I always encourage people to start on paper. If you don't want to, that's totally your prerogative. Do whatever you want. But the example I give is learning how to play guitar. I learned on electric guitar, right? And then I wanted to move to an acoustic guitar. It was so much harder to move from an electric guitar to an acoustic guitar than it would have been the opposite if I would have learned on an acoustic and then I moved to an electric, right? Because of like how hard you have to push your fingers down, how like it's just bigger, you have to slide your hands up.
Hmm.
Like the it's just like, in
It's
my
true.
opinion, a little
True.
easier to learn on electric guitar. And then you might give up going to an acoustic. Whereas you start an acoustic, you go to electric, and you're like, man, this is so easy,
Hmm.
right? So if you start with what might be a little bit harder, right, which is paper,
Yeah.
and then move to digital, you can experience all the benefits of the flexibility that digital provides. You can erase stuff, you can move stuff around, you can change color, you can do whatever you want on digital, which is amazing. But I love the beauty and constraint of paper. You have to make a mark and you have to live with that mark for the most part,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's permanent, it's there. You have a constraint of size. You only have so many pens, probably, and they're all different sizes. Like you have to work with what you have.
Yeah.
And I think constraint is good from that perspective. And then moving to digital, you might have to get used to the fluidity of like drawing on a slippery surface, but you already have like the foundation
Okay.
of it. So if you want to just do digital, that's cool too, and you'll get all the benefits of the flexibility. But I find a lot of people, once they start digital, it's hard to get them to do it on paper if they're in that
I
situation.
understand. Yeah.
But I love the like, the low tech part of paper. Anybody can do it.
Hmm.
Everybody's got a piece of scrap paper and a broken pencil lying
For
around,
sure.
right?
Here in Canada, we have a store called Dollar Store. And
Yes.
one of my favorite aisles is all that creativity stuff, that you can
Yes,
buy.
I'll
It's
meet you
very
there.
inexpensive. And then you can buy a set of markers for what? $4, 3.50 or something. It's not
Yeah.
expensive. But when it comes to digital, what do you give advice as to what app or program works best? And in that case, is it not a little bit more expensive that way?
Yeah, there are a few free drawing programs. I am not an Apple person, so if you are an Apple, you're probably going to want to use Procreate. It is the most robust, the most like it has lots of fun hacks in it. It's pretty awesome from what I've heard. I've seen people use it and it looks amazing. So it is a fee. I think it's like $20 or something like that, but I think it's worth the investment. One program that I think I want to play around with a little bit, which I've heard really good things about, is Adobe Fresco. People have been using that one a lot. But basically, just go into like your app store and just type in drawing program, and you'll come up with a bunch. There is a learning curve for any program, whether it's robust or not, right? Getting used to where the pens are and how
Yeah.
things flow and the sizing like takes a bit of time. So usually what I tell people is just pick one and just learn it. Like spend several hours just playing around in it, not even like, oh, I want to draw something, just playing in it
Hmm.
because that learning curve can be quite steep. Um, but the program I use is called Sketchbook Pro, and I
Okay.
have been using that like every day basically since the pandemic.
Mhm.
So I started learning it a little bit beforehand because I figured some people eventually would ask me to do digital. So I'm glad I did a little bit beforehand. But the program I use is Sketchbook Pro, and I use it very, very minimally. I use like 2 pens, a couple colors. That's pretty much it. Because with sketchnoting or visual note taking, a lot of times there is also this constraint of time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
it's a
guess it
half an
would be.
hour presentation or it's an hour long classroom lecture, right? So you don't actually have a lot of time to like make things like pretty or
Hmm.
beautiful or fill it all in and use all these fun pens. You don't
Yeah.
actually have the luxury of time. So I usually honestly don't talk about it or teach a lot about it because it's all kind of personal preference and you don't have a lot of time.
Hmm. Hmm. We're recording this in November 2023. So Christmas is just right around the corner. And I saw that you wrote a book called A Happy Holiday Activity Book. So let's hear about that one.
Yeah, it's just another like, little pet project of mine. There's lots of about half of it is like learn how to draw things. So that's step by step, like draw a bow, draw a Christmas tree, draw an elf hat, draw all these things. And then some other activities kind of thrown in there for sure. It's holiday because not just Christmas. I threw some like Kwanzaa and Hanukkah things in there as well, which is kind of fun. And
Cool.
yeah, it's I think, kids, obviously having my own kids is one thing, but you know, caring for and educating small children was my first career. So it does still also hold like a really special place in my heart, like small kids. So I feel like I've just sort of with some of these like activity and doodle books is also kind of like this my passion and love for like all things children and allowing them to
Hmm.
have some opportunities to be creative as well.
Neat. Not so long ago, I was a kid, and when I saw activity book, it brought back some really great memories. I loved activity books for sure.
Oh my gosh, my 10-year-old asked us, I think she might have been 9 when she asked us, and we were relaxing, and she asked me and my husband, she said, "Why do adults love to be bored?" I thought that was pretty funny, but yeah, no, they're so joyful, and we're like I don't want them when they grow up to lose that childlike spirit too, right? I find we get ourselves into these like more corporate settings. You have to be like grown up and adult, and we lose like the playfulness in life and the childlikeness. So yeah, anytime that
Neat.
I have an opportunity to kind of be playful and have fun, like I feel like that's what life should be about.
Neat. Yeah, I bet you do a very good presentation. Very captivating. How are your book sales?
Oh, they're pretty good. Yeah, it's I still am doing mostly my professional work as a live illustrator, graphic facilitator. So the great thing is every time I'm in a setting where people get to see and experience my work, now I can say to those people who were like, "Oh, I wish I could learn how to do this." And I'm like, "Well, you can, and here's a book." So last week, for example, when I was doing those events, I get an opportunity to kind of mention them, and I usually get a couple of sales like from just showing up and being in those spaces. So, um, yeah, a lot of it kind of comes from that currently, because I haven't spent a ton of extra time doing promotion just for
Right.
the
Right.
beginner's guide to sketchnoting, and for other things they're kind of like, you know side things for now. But moving into next year, I really want to focus more on educating people on how to do sketchnoting, and I did start a online community earlier this year, so I'm just sort of learning through that process and trying to um, not just have the book, but have an online support community where people
Right.
can post their sketch notes in a safe space where they can get feedback or we can celebrate with them. And I do online workshops with them. And it's been really fun learning from those people. And it's a very worldwide community, which is really cool too. So that's kind of like a small but growing online space. And I know that some of my super fans in there will kind of start to become ambassadors for the community and for the book. So, kind of looking at the book in terms of promotion through this education model as well. And going back to our conversation about school systems, it's something now that I know my 10-year-old, she's learning note taking in school. So now it's something that I really want to start doing in the new year is how to get into kind of grade 5 or 6 classrooms to start teaching this to students as an option as they are learning their note taking. Because I would find myself in the last number of years more in older groups like grade nines, but they're like a little bit too cool for school at that age. So trying to get them where they're starting to learn note taking as an option, that's sort of where I'm also kind of working towards as well. And I anticipate there'll be like, some book sales and things from that process too. So yeah, I kind of, have spent the last 6 months since the book has been out, just sort of in this kind of learning space. And I was approaching my book launch as from a year perspective.
Hmm.
What can I do in a year? What does the book launch year look like? Which is something that I learned in Rob's community, Rob Fitzpatrick, the Write Useful Books guy.
Hmm.
And I really love that philosophy because it takes the pressure off of like, oh, well, I launched a book and it's out there, like, see you later, right? So, and I know from someone who's been like growing and building a business that I didn't want to just like put it out there and be like, see you later. That I know this is like an investment of my time over time and how my business is going to change more for the next year or so as well. So, and I'm hoping that I can really use the book to leverage myself as somebody who is knowledgeable in this space and a place to learn and grow.
Very
Yeah.
impressive. Very nice.
Thanks.
Very good. I'm happy for you.
I'm trying my best over here.
Yeah.
I'm just making it up as I go along.
Yeah, aren't we all? But you're making it up quite well. Ashton, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Listening to your energy has really put me in a good mood for the rest of the day.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so happy about that.
Excellent. I wish you all the best and success in the new year with all these plans you have. I'm sure they'll work out just fine. And all the best to you and your family. And you take care.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, John, for having me.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye bye. Thank you for watching. And before you go, if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. You can even leave a comment. All of that really helps in recommending this channel to a larger audience. And if you are an author, I would love to speak with you about your book. Until next time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.